The latest tech.
I'm Alexa. I can answer your questions.
Interviews.
And we are evolving, and we are seeing an amazing opportunity that is happening.
Accessibility.
Accessibility is one of our core values. It's even a part of our mission statement.
This is Double Tap TV.
Welcome to Double Tap TV. Thank you guys for being with us each and every single week. It's so nice to be with you again this week. If you want to email us, it's feedback@ami.ca. Please do that, whether it's a complaint, a suggestion, or just, I don't know, feedback. Do it. Feedback@ami.ca. On Twitter, we are at Double Tap Canada. Use that hashtag, which is AskDoubleTap, and we promise to get to your questions on or off the air. I am Mark Aflalo with Stephen Scott by my side each and every single week. Stephen, a fun topic this week, and one that I never thought we'd necessarily tackle in this way, and that is gaming. Gaming specifically because Forza Horizon 5, that's the version, right, is fully accessible to people with visual impairments.
Well, let's just stop and take that in for a second, right? This is a driving game that's accessible to blind people. Okay, just let's try and wrap our heads around that for a second, okay? It is incredible. And, you're absolutely right. Talking about gaming, in my years of talking about accessible tech, we've very rarely touched on the subject of gaming. At least, we've maybe talked about the kind of echo games, those echo games that you get because they're all, of course, audio-based. Oh, you do have those RPG games, some text-based games that people love and blind people love to play. But when it comes to console games like your Xbox or your PlayStation 5, it's very unlikely that we would have ever touched on that. Now we can, because more and more of these games are starting to become accessible. This recent game, Forza Horizon 5, I must say, took a lot of us by surprise. But yeah, it is a fully accessible game for blind and partially sighted people. And note I said blind people as well.
So we've got two incredible guests joining us this week. One directly from the mothership themselves over at the Xbox Game Studio. And we've got, of course, our friend of the show, Courtney Craven, is going to be joining us, talking all about the experience of, actually playing this game first person. I mean, you say caught by surprise, but I don't think that is even an adequate way to explain the surprise that comes into the concept of a driving game where you can go 200 plus miles per hour and do that while getting audio cues and feedback. Now, I've played this game first person. I've played this game with a steering wheel, with a controller, and I'll tell you, it's not an easy game when you can see what's going on.
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to play it yourself, Stephen?
No, because no one will send me or let me buy an Xbox Series 5 or whatever it is, Xbox Series S, or I can never work out. You need to tell me which is the best Xbox to buy.
Xbox Series X is the latest version that we're on.
That's the expensive
one,
one,
we'll take
right?
care of that for you. We're going to have to take care of that for you because more and more, Stephen, I think this is just the start of a trend that we're going to see. I mean, we saw The Last of Us Volume 2, about 2 years ago, I think it was. Steve Saylor was on the show, and he talked about that game and that experience that really moved him to tears to be able to not only consult on that game, but actually be able to play it for the first time. So I can only imagine his reaction or other gamers' reaction who have low vision when they can play a game of this caliber. Really, it honestly blows my mind.
Well, yeah, and I think it's the how, isn't it? Because, you're wondering the same question I'm wondering. Normally when we have these chats, I always feel a bit smug going, well, Mark, of course, it should always have been accessible. But actually in this one, I'm like, how on earth do they make a game like this accessible to blind people, right? How am I supposed to be able to drive a car at 200 miles an hour without going straight into a wall? These are the kind of issues that come up against with these games. You can maybe say there's audio feedback that you can use, there's certainly audio cues, but at that speed, how do you know where the corner is? How do you know how tight the corner is and how to navigate it and how much you need to brake and, of course, other cars? So, all that, it's very interesting. I'm really looking forward to getting into the chat today. Courtney Craven, they're deaf, so, that's going to be interesting to talk about from that perspective. But of course, we're going to hear all about Steve Saylor's views, Sightless Combat as well, another prolific YouTube gamer out there who's totally blind, and Ian Hamilton as well, a well-known face. He's been on our show as well, talking about gaming in the past. We're going to be talking about all these guys' experiences of playing this particular game, and also finding out more about caniplaythat.com, because I want to sort of question Courtney on how useful this site is going to be in the future. Is there going to come a point where, the question, can I play that, is just yes. And that's great. That's that website gone. One down. Because that's what's going to happen, right?
I guess that's a good goal, though.
Yeah.
Isn't that a good goal, though?
Absolutely.
To have a site like that actually randomly disappear because everything is playable, and this is what I'm curious to know what your opinion is, because this is something that you can't go back on, right? A game like Forza, where you have so many elements at play here, making that accessible to someone who's blind. Once you've done this, there's nobody that can come up and say, I can't make my game accessible. Because there are always ways to make a game accessible. This is something you can do. And when a game like Forza pushes those limits and actually delivers something to that extent, I can't imagine another type of game. I think Flight Simulator, think of any Mario Kart, any game that's out there. I don't think they have an argument in hell to be able to say, no, we're not going to make this game accessible.
No, and also, I think we all have to accept the fact that we're going to be talking about games moving forward being more accessible. That is, I think, the right demand to make of game developers and these companies, to say, look, from this point forward, clearly Microsoft have the tools, clearly these other game studios that are developing games like The Last of Us Part 2 are capable of doing it. So go talk to them. If you don't know how to do it, ask, talk to the disabled community. Go to websites like caniplaythat.com, speak to the experts. Can I Play That's just one website of many, but the fact is, these websites exist and they are fantastic resources for developers to talk to disabled people. I mean, wow, there's a unique idea, right? Let's talk to a disabled person and see what they think. Well, believe it or not, that is a crazy idea in our world at times. And it shouldn't be. So, go speak to disabled people, talk through these kind of groups, talk to people like Steve Saylor, Ian Hamilton, and others, because they will tell you what they need in the games, and they'll also point you to the resources like these developers, like Microsoft in this case, who have taken a game that you would not think at all. If you'd said to me 5 months ago, do you think a game like Forza Horizon 5 would be accessible? I'd say, no way. And that's me as a blind guy who advocates for this all the time. But I wouldn't expect that to happen. But it has. So you're absolutely right. The genie's out of the bottle. It can't go back in.
So let's find out what Courtney has to say about it, and let's find out what Microsoft has to say about that experience after we take a quick break here on Double Tap TV. He is Stephen Scott. I am Mark Aflalo. We'll be back in just a moment.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit ami.ca/doubletap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being with us, talking all things accessible gaming, thanks to the recent release of Forza Horizon 5, which is completely accessible. I am Mark Aflalo with Stephen Scott by my side. Welcoming our next guest, Courtney Craven is the founder and I guess the person who runs the website caniplaythat.com. Courtney, thank you so much for being with us again here on Double Tap TV. So many things to cover this week, starting with, the fact that, there's certainly a lot of games out there, especially, for the console. I mean, the variety is absolutely insane when you go back as far as you can go back now and play some older games on the Xbox. But how can game developers go further when it comes to making their games as accessible as possible?
Yeah, I think it was Ian Hamilton has said before that there is never going to be a game that is 100% accessible to everyone. But we're seeing more and more games that at least have reduced barriers for everyone. Games like this, Steve Saylor, who's blind, was able to play it successfully and win. Sightless Combat, who's totally blind, was able to play it, and I believe he's having a good time in it as well. And it's a testament to the work that's being done, both that you see on social media and that you see in the news and stuff like that, and behind the scenes at studios, the people that are really working to advocate for that idea that gaming is for everyone. And it's all starting to come to fruition, even though it's been kind of going on behind the scenes, I guess, for a lot of years.
So, Courtney, as a blind guy myself, how am I able to drive a car at 200 miles an hour without going straight into a brick wall? How is this possible? I am fascinated by this.
So there's a couple features that would make it a bit more accessible for a totally blind player. There's a game speed for when you're playing offline and you're racing what the game calls drivatars, which are AI representations of your Xbox friends. And then so you can slow it down and have more time to react to things. And then there's various features that are kind of under the hood in the settings menu that you can tweak. Braking assistance, so if you're coming up to a curve, it'll help brake for you instead of you needing to know. And for low vision players, there is a driving line that changes color. That's pretty big and right in your line of sight. And then there's also, I believe, there's steering assistance. You can totally rely on computer assisted steering in the game. So you can punch it and go 300 miles an hour, and then when you come up to a curve, you'll have that assistance to successfully get around the curve.
I guess it's quite difficult to create the experience of driving. Despite all these wonderful assistive features that they bring in, it must be difficult to try and recreate that perfectly. I guess we don't want to lose that feeling through the gameplay. So how do we achieve that?
I think it would depend from person to person, but I think, like looking at what Steve Saylor had to say about it, it's the first game that he's really been able to have any kind of experience in, whether it's assisted or not. He's been able to play it and feel like he's being successful because he can play it the way he needs to. So I think it would have to do with your expectations when you come into the game. If you expect to be able to play it completely unassisted, you're probably going to be disappointed because you will need to rely on some of those features, but that's true for anyone. I would be disappointed if I went into it expecting to not have to use subtitles, because there's no way to convey that information to me without subtitles turned on, But I think, it's probably, it might disappoint some people that they can't totally be immersed in it and play assistance free, but we might get there eventually as we continue to iterate on reducing barriers in games.
It certainly feels like there are a lot more accessible games out there. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, when we launched, even 3 years ago, the most frequent answer to the "can I play that" question for a lot of disabilities was no, you can't. You're probably at some point going to run into a barrier that's going to make you stop being able to play this game. And we're seeing less and less of that. So I joke with our writing staff that, can I play that? Probably. Yeah, maybe. Which doesn't seem like a perfect answer, and it's not. It'll be perfect when the answer is always yes. But maybe is such huge progress for just 3 years since we launched. So hopefully that inspires hope in people that are still finding barriers that keep them from being able to play the games they want to play, because we are making progress. Even though it's slow and painful, it's happening.
If you guys want to learn more about Courtney Craven, head on over to caniplaythat.com. Next, we bring a very, very cool guest on, direct from Xbox Game Studios, to talk about the creation of this and why it came to be in the first place. And I'm really curious to find out about the future of accessible gaming. It is Double Tap TV with Stephen Scott and Mark Aflalo. We'll be back in just a moment.
For more great Double Tap TV content, visit ami.ca/doubletap. This is Double Tap TV.
We are back on Double Tap TV. Thank you guys so much for being with us this week, talking all about accessible gaming, a topic, Stephen, that I never thought we'd be talking about on this show. But here we are, talking all about accessible gaming. So I'm going to bring on our next guest without further ado. Her name is Tara Welker, and she's the Xbox Game Studios accessibility lead. Tara, welcome to Double Tap TV. I love all the titles at Microsoft. They never get short. They're always much longer than they should ever be. But I think it's as descriptive as we need to be when it comes to what you do at Microsoft.
Yeah, I'm very lucky to have a job title that expressly says what I do. There's so many job titles at Microsoft. You're like, what does that even mean? No, mine is very clear. For Xbox Game Studios, I am the accessibility lead. Nice and simple.
I've got to ask you this question before we really dive into the meat of things here, which is, could you have ever thought that the day would come when a game like Forza Horizon 5 would be accessible?
No, but at the same time, if you would have even asked me a few years ago if my job were a job that would exist in the future, I would have said no. So obviously I wasn't dreaming big enough in either regard.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible, Tara, when you think about it. I'm someone who's blind, who loves, the idea of playing a lot of games, but I've been put off for many years because I just haven't had the ability to do it, and even to the point where I've just never bought a console. I've never gone out because I've thought, even though Microsoft have done a power of work in making the console accessible, if I don't have the games to play, what's the point, right? But that's changing. And, a game like Forza Horizon 5 it sounds incredible to me. How do you go about making that game accessible, especially to someone who's blind?
Really, the key to making any game accessible is talking to gamers with disabilities. That's it. Like, where are you struggling? Where can't you go? Why can't you play? What is preventing you from being able to accomplish the goal of playing a game? Now, I'm not going to say that Forza Horizon 5 is completely accessible to blind gamers, gamers with no vision, because it's not. Like, there are definitely areas that we can improve. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that. It's not perfect. There are things we know we could improve on. But we've already put feedback mechanisms in place so gamers can tell us, like, this is where I'm struggling. This is what I can't do. And when you actually go try to solve the problems that gamers are highlighting, and then using in Xbox, we use user research. We have an amazing group dedicated explicitly to getting feedback from gamers with disabilities. We can then learn, like, did we actually meet this goal? Did we miss it? Do we need to go back to the drawing board and try again? And honestly, that was the key to the success, is just literally working with gamers with disabilities to try to meet their needs.
Let's talk about that drawing board for a second, because before you go back to a drawing board to try to fix something, where did this start? Like, you've got a lot of first-party games at Microsoft. So where do you look at the catalog and say, Forza, let's make that accessible?
So what I absolutely love about Xbox Game Studios is all of the studios, they're all kind of in competition with one another. Like, they are constantly wanting to, like, one up the other studios. And so Gears of War 5, when it came out, had made a lot of improvement in terms of accessibility. They had patched in features for deaf, hard of hearing folks that were making massive changes. They had started investing in the no to low vision space. And after seeing, Gears 5 and the Coalition kind of set this new benchmark internally, Playground Games and Turn 10 Studios, they were like, okay, well, we're going to beat you. And that was kind of literally how it started. Like, they wanted to be the cherry on the top of the Xbox Game Studios sundae. And they decided to hold what we now call inclusive design workshops, where we work to bring in several different gamers with disabilities directly into the studio to have a 2-day workshop. The first day was all about learning, education, literally talking to these gamers themselves, and asking, like, what driving games do you like? Well, why do you like that game instead of our game? Oh, if you could change one thing, what would it be? And learning again about what was working for them, what wasn't. And then the second day was all about ideation. Once you know what the problem is, you can try to fix it. And so many of the features that you see in Forza Horizon 5, including the ones that will be patched soon, such as the American Sign Language and British Sign Language available in the cutscenes, those are direct results from things that these gamers were highlighting in this workshop that we had at the start of development. So that was actually, as we were winding down Forza Horizon 4, we had that workshop so that as we were ramping up on Forza Horizon 5, we would be able to have all of that knowledge early so we could actually get it into the product.
We were talking earlier with Courtney Craven about the gameplay itself and how you make the gameplay as enjoyable as possible, as similar an experience to everyone else as possible, but at the same time bringing in those assistive tools that help someone play a game. So whether it's maybe slowing the game down a little bit, or changing an aspect of the game that for someone else would maybe put them either out of sync with someone, or just make it obviously so easier for them to play, but ultimately it does create a bit of a disconnect between one person's experience and another.
So from my perspective, and a lot of game developers will have different answers to this, I'm sure, that everyone's experience is relative. What may be hard for me may not be hard for you, or vice versa. I mean, if I were to pick up and try to use my computer with exclusively a screen reader, like, I'm going to do it way slower than you do it because you do it all the time, I assume. Like, that doesn't mean that, one of us is using a screen reader wrong. It just means, like, I do it less. I have a different experience. So even offering the same, literally the exact same options, people are already going to have a different experience. And so what you want to do is craft the same feeling. What do I need to offer to you so you get the level of challenge I want you to have? What do I have to do to give you this level of enjoyment? And so when you allow people to customize to hit that, that's when you get everyone the same core experience that you want them to have, while having, again, the level of fun or the level of challenge that you wanted them to have in the first place.
But what you don't want to happen is for all disabled players to have the easy mode, right? You don't want, as much as we all want it to be enjoyable and usable, we don't want it to be on easy mode. We want to have a bit of a challenge ourselves, right? So that's part of it, isn't it? Is making sure that the experience is the same even at the harder end. So, you don't end up with this very simplistic gameplay.
Exactly. It's, one of the things that I think people were well-intentioned in saying is that, if we just had easier difficulty modes, people with disabilities could play. And I have friends, who have amazing response time, who can aim better than I ever could if they only knew what they were aiming at. They don't need it to be easier. Like if we were playing in high contrast mode, they'd kick my butt every time. They have the skills, they just need to know what they're aiming at. So it's important that, again, we're adjusting the things that need adjusted. If you are fast, if you're smart, if you know the layout of the map, you probably don't need easy mode. You probably just need something that highlights who you're shooting at. Or, in the case of Forza Horizon, maybe you just get lost driving around the map. Maybe you're an awesome racer. You just need your map to show you where to go. That doesn't mean you want the game easier. You just want to know where you're going. And again, it's identifying those key things that you just let people work with, again, to get that intended challenge.
Tara Welker, Xbox Game Studio Accessibility Lead, we hope to have you on again real soon. On behalf of yourself, Stephen Scott, and Courtney Craven, thank you guys so much for being here this week on this edition of Double Tap TV.
Hosted by Mark Aflalo and Stephen Scott. Editing Jordan Steves and Mark Aflalo. Voiceover Anna Vicino. Integrated Described Video Specialist Ron Rickford. Coordinating Producer Jennifer Johnson. Director Production Kara Nye. Director Programming Brian Perdue. VP Content Development and Programming John Melville. President and CEO David Arrington. Copyright 2022 Accessible Media Inc.